Hello everybody, and welcome back to Granted Gardens. Today we are going to do something super exciting. Number one, it's Thanksgiving week, which means everyone's probably going to be spending a ton of time in the kitchen, including myself. So I've been shooting some videos of what I've been working on in the kitchen. Today is super special because today we're going to make my most favorite part, one of my most favorite parts of Thanksgiving. Pumpkin pie. Ooh, pumpkin pie. And we're not going to just make any old pumpkin pie. We are making pumpkin pie from scratch. Check it out. Okay, so the reason why I get really excited about pumpkin pie is because, quite honestly, it is my most favorite dessert when it comes to Thanksgiving. I'm not a big sweets person, but it's really hard for me to turn down a slice of pumpkin pie. Also, I really love pumpkins, and I'm really mad because we did not grow any this year, but we'll get to that in a second. I love pumpkins, so I always buy pumpkins every single year, and we usually carve them and whatnot. But it wasn't until probably 3 years ago that I realized that there are different types of pumpkins. I hate to say that, but there are. There are carving pumpkins, there are pie pumpkins, there's tons of different kinds. So I do usually do this off of a pie pumpkin recipe. This year, we're using a Cinderella pumpkin. So this will be my first time using Cinderella pumpkin. It's still a pie pumpkin. It's gonna be fine, but it's just a little bit bigger than your standard pie pumpkins. So I'm gonna walk you through how to prep the pumpkin all the way down to making crust and finishing up your pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving. So thanks so much for watching. Let's see how this turns out. So first and foremost, you want to go ahead and you want to wash your pumpkin. I just washed him under water. I didn't use soap or anything, just to make sure you got all the dirt cleaned off if there's any bugs, whatnot. You get them rinsed. Now next, what you're going to do is you're going to want to cut him open so that you can take out the guts. I'm going to go ahead and cut directly down the center and then probably across this way too. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this into fours. So I went ahead and I cut my pumpkin into fours. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and clean out all of the guts in here, okay? All this needs to come out, all the stringy stuff and the seeds. Please also note that this is a perfect time to collect some seeds so that maybe I'll get pumpkins in the garden next year. I'm gonna try and save some of these. For the sake of saving seeds, I went through and just hand picked out the seeds. I put them on this plate. I did my best to try and clean off all of the goop and stuff, but I'm not gonna take too much time on that right now. I'm just gonna set these aside. These are also really good if you bake them and put some salt on them. They're delicious just as a snack. But I'm gonna go ahead and set them aside. As for the rest of this, I'm just going to take this spoon and just carve out the rest of this stringy stuff, and we'll move on to the next step. So you can see here I've got them pretty well cleaned out. You want to make sure that you get the stringy stuff out, but you don't want to take off any of the meat. So be careful. This pumpkin, they're very soft, so it may be easy for you to kind of start chunking into the meat. Just be careful with it. Also, while you're working on that, you can go ahead and turn your oven on, set it to 450, and let that preheat while you're working on cleaning out your pumpkins. 450. Next, you want to make sure you cut off the stem. You want to cut off the stem, otherwise it'll burn in the oven. So got the stem cut off, and then you want to place your pumpkin in a pan, okay? So I'm trying to leave it so that there's openings so that the steam can come out. You don't want to jam pack them in there too much to where there's no airflow. But I think that my pumpkin fit pretty well here. And then I just threw in some of the pieces that I accidentally cut off right in the side here. Now we're gonna go ahead and add just about a ½ inch of water just to keep the pumpkin moist. So once you've got a ½ inch of water in the bottom of the pan, you're set and ready to go. Now I always do my pumpkin puree first before I do my crust. And the reason for that being is because this can This is something that you can kind of do without being rushed. You can do this and it's not very time sensitive. But once you start doing the crust, you kind of have to keep on it and you got to keep it going. So you wouldn't want to run into the point where you're ready to put your crust in the oven, but your pumpkins are still in there. So I do the pumpkins first. Once the oven is preheated, we're going to go ahead and stick the pumpkin in for about 45 minutes at 450. Okay, so our pumpkin has been in the oven for 45 minutes, so I'm gonna go and check on it. So what we're gonna do, how we're gonna check this, is I'm gonna grab a fork. You want the fork to be able to pierce the skin of the pumpkin without any effort. So if it sinks right in, you're good, it's done. If you have to put a little bit of effort into it to get it to pierce that skin, you gotta leave it in a little bit longer. So let's see where we're at. All right, so we're gonna just test it out. Not quite piercing yet. I think I'm gonna put it in for, with a little bit of effort I was able to pierce that. I think I'm gonna put it in for another 20 to 25 minutes. Now this pumpkin was much larger than your average pie pumpkin, so it might actually take more time. The flesh is pretty well cooked, but I think I'm gonna put it in for another 20 minutes. Okay, so I put my pumpkin back in for an additional 20 minutes. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scoop the pumpkin out of the shell and I'm gonna actually go ahead and chop it up. And what I use for like my smoothies, I just don't feel like going downstairs and getting the food processor. It's gonna be soft enough, this will be fine. It just might take me a little bit longer doing it this way because the container's small. But we're gonna scoop out the pumpkin and we're gonna go ahead and chop it up. So this is my setup. You gotta be careful because this pumpkin's gonna be really hot. It was enough for me to just touch it for a little while to pull it out of the pan here. So I'm gonna go ahead and scoop out this right here. And it comes out super, super easy. It should not be hard to scoop out. And we're gonna just go ahead and put it in here, fill this up, and then we're gonna chop it. So you can see I've gotten most of the pulp here off of the pumpkin skin. And I've got it in here. We're gonna just go ahead and blend this so that we get it nice and pureed. So it should look something like this. I'm gonna go ahead and add this to this bowl, and I'm gonna repeat this process for the rest of the pumpkin. Okay, so once I process the whole pumpkin, this is what I end up with. This is quite a bit of pumpkin puree. We will not need all of this for a pie. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to making the pie, but the rest of this that I don't use, I'll just freeze.
Okay, so now we're gonna make the crust. Right now I've just got some all-purpose flour, 1 cup. I've got 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/3 of a cup of shortening. You can use a butter equivalent or oil if you preferred, but this is just what the recipe called for. And then I have 3 tablespoons of cold water. So we're just gonna add all this in here, start mixing it up, and then we'll take the next step. Okay, so now that we've got everything mixed, you can see there's not any big chunks of flour or anything like that, and we just made a ball. Then you'll get 2 sheets of wax paper, or just 1 like I do, and then you'll roll it over and use a rolling pin, make it a flat circle, probably about 1/4 of an inch thick. Then you're ready to go to put it in the pan. Okay, so now that we've got it rolled out, you're gonna, if you had 2 pieces, you'll take the top piece off. If you have 1 piece like me, you'll just pull it off, kind of tuck it under. Keep your thing, and then just flip it over, kind of press it in place. And voila! 1 pie crust.
Beautiful.
Okay, so now we're gonna make the pumpkin pie filling. So inside the bowl, I've got 1 3/4 cups of the pumpkin puree. I've got 1 3/4 cups of milk, 3 eggs, half a teaspoon of ginger, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, and half a teaspoon of salt in this one. 2 tablespoons of sugar, and 2/3 cup of brown sugar, plus the 3 eggs if I didn't say those.
You did.
So all we're gonna do is add all those things, and then we'll mix this up and put it into our pie crust. And a mix. So we've preheated the oven to 425, and there's 2 ways to do this. If you're a surgeon or a doctor and you have super steady hands, you can pour the filling into the pie crust before you put it in the oven. Me personally, not that good at it, and I don't want to spill it all over the place. So we're going to actually leave the pie pan in the stove with the rack partially pulled out, pour it in, then push the rack back in. Don't worry if it looks really wet, it always looks like that. It'll definitely firm up. Okay, so we're at 425. We're going to leave that in there for 15 minutes. Then we're going to drop the temperature to 350 for another 45 minutes. And then it's done. You can see our crust didn't come out perfect around the edges like a nice store-bought one. If you did have enough that the edges came up and out, that's okay, that's pretty normal. But halfway through the whole cooking process, you'll actually cut out a little round of aluminum foil, place that over the edge of the crust, that way you don't burn the crust. But that's pretty much it. Okay, so instead of the 15 at 450 and then the 45 at 350, we actually ended up cooking it 15 at 450, but more close to an hour at 350. But obviously, knife goes in, comes out clean, it's ready to go. We hope it works out for you. It worked out for us. We can't wait to try it. And we hope to share more with you soon, and thanks for watching.